In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. Well, it's that time again for the intergenerational sermon, which means I break out the old ukulele. You all ready for this? Well, let's get started. I have prepared a special song. Are all of you familiar with Old MacDonald Had a Farm? Good. I thought today we would sing a version of that called Old St. Francis Had a Farm. And since we have a lot of dogs here today, I thought we'd start with dogs on that farm. Does that sound okay? Do we have any other animals? Is it all dogs today? Cats? Oh, good. You know what? So why don't we give it a shot? We'll start with the easy one. We'll start with the cat, and we'll go from there, okay? You guys ready? Old St. Francis had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on that farm he had a cat, E-I-E-I-O, with a meow meow here and a meow meow there, here a meow, there a meow, everywhere a meow meow. Old St. Francis had a cat, E-I-E-I-O, farm. Okay, so let's try a bearded dragon. So Old St. Francis had a bearded dragon, okay? And what sound are we gonna go with? Okay, let's do it. Old St. Francis had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on that farm he had a bearded dragon, E-I-E-I-O, with a here and a there, here a there a everywhere a. Old St. Francis had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. Okay, and then we have an easy one, the dog. Old St. Francis had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on that farm he had a dog, E-I-E-I-O, with a bark, bark here and a roof, roof there, here a roof, there a roof, everywhere a roof. Old St. Francis had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. Hey! Woo! You guys are getting good at that. Wow, I'm impressed. Thank you for singing. And today, we come together for this wonderful celebration of St. Francis of Assisi to bless all these wonderful animals that are here. And St. Francis of Assisi got this wonderful reputation for a love of animals because St. Francis would go out into nature and he'd see the birds and he'd see the foxes and he'd address them by brother and sister. And he'd go out into nature and he'd look up at the moon and he'd say, "Hello, sister moon." And he'd look at the sun and go, "Hello, brother sun." And he had this wonderful connection with creation, so much so that Pope John Paul II made him the patron saint of ecology in 1992. And the intention of that was to put this deeper awareness of the church to being mindful of our planet and to see our connectedness with all living things. So who here knows about St. Francis? You guys all up to speed? Well, good. We got a couple. Well, if we are not, I thought we'd give you a little bit of a history, a little idea of St. Francis's life. St. Francis grew up in a very affluent household. His father was a trader, so he had a good education. He was spoiled as a kid, but he decided to go to war and have that experience when he was just a teenager. And while at war, he was actually captured for a year. And upon returning home, something shifted for St. Francis. Something was different. He was no longer as comfortable living the lavish lifestyle that he had. And so things began to shift, and he renounced his inheritance to his father's chagrin, who was very upset about this. And so St. Francis started doing day labor, doing work in the area, the community in Italy, near Assisi that he lived. And he started reconstructing churches. That was one thing. There was all these churches in disrepair, and he started fixing them up. And while he did this, people started following him and helping him out. And so this whole order of St. Francis began that we know of today, that continues. Now, St. Francis was a real, what they'd call Orthodox medieval Catholic. He wasn't trying to change things up at all. He supported going to confession regularly. He received the Eucharist. He respected priests. He accepted Christ in the Eucharist. And he preached only when he was permitted to do so by the bishop. He followed all the church's rules, but he put Jesus first and foremost. And he took what Jesus commanded him very, very seriously. He took it so seriously, he gave away all he had, and he really followed seriously the vows he took of poverty and chastity and obedience. So the question I have is, what caused this transformation in St. Francis's life? What drew him into such a deep relationship with God? And what were these moments that strengthened St. Francis throughout his life? Now, one of the moments that's recorded is this moment when he attended Mass. It was at St. Mary's of the Angels in Porzioncola, which is a little town next to Assisi. Have you ever been there? It's really pretty. I was lucky to go with my family a few years ago. Now, the gospel of that day was Jesus' commissioning of the 12. It's chapter 10 in Matthew's gospel. It's where Jesus gathers all of the disciples there and commissions them. He says, "Do not get any gold or silver or copper to take with you, no bag for your journey or extra shirt or sandals or staff." And he also says, "I am sending you out like sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." You remember that? Yeah, a little bit. Well, Francis took it very seriously. And it's from that gospel that he constructed this rule of life and this order that he followed. But I still come back to wondering, what were those experiences he had where he connected with God? Did he have an experience as a child? Did he have an experience maybe when he went off to war and he was captured? Were there moments before and after he returned and renounced his inheritance, where he wrestled with his ministry, where he wrestled with his family, that he felt God's presence, lifting those burdens and making himself feel lighter? So, as with all intergenerational sermons, there's an opportunity to share. You guys are all ready and warmed up for that, I can see. So I thought it might be nice for us today to talk about our spiritual journeys. I thought we might take a moment to look at the kingdom that dwells in each of us and share from the stories in our own life that have strengthened us when we have felt God's presence. And I want us to focus on this interior journey with the hopes that you might share just a glimpse of that secret and sacred peace of the kingdom that dwells inside of you. That place that is kept secret and protected from the outside world. So where have you had a moment where you let go of trying to be so wise and intelligent and allowed yourself to have the mind of a child, that sensitivity of a child, and connect with God? What is that moment in your life where you felt freed in a moment of distress? When you might have been weary and carrying a heavy burden and found rest? Or when your yoke became easy and your burden became light? So I open the mic to you to share from your heart. And remember that there might be a couple of you that want to share. So if you're able to share succinctly, that would be wonderful, because it would allow for others to share too. So, anyone out there? It's awful quiet. Jenny, my wife, raised her hand. She said she was going to do this. I actually have a story that I was going to share too, but you might share the same story. I don't know. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's see. Succinct. I'm going to start there. So he knows me, so he knows I have to focus. So anyway, okay, so 10 years ago, after I had my stroke, I spent 3 months in the hospital, and the last month in the hospital is when I really started to kind of regain my ability to think and understand kind of what had happened to me. And because at first I didn't really know much of anything. And so my last week in the hospital, they told me that they were going to discharge me. And by then I had begun to walk again and do lots of things again. But I'm like, you want to discharge me? And I'm like, and I'm looking at myself and I'm like, but I'm not normal again. Like, how can you do this? So I remember feeling so, I was trying to sleep at one night, and I remember feeling so kind of like despairing and thinking, well, how is this even, I'm beginning to grapple with the reality of what's happened. Yeah. And so there was a moment I remember laying in bed, and even though prayer has always been essential in my life, there was this moment where it was like I heard this whisper, you can always pray. And I was like, for the first time, like to me that was God saying, pray. And so that was that moment where I felt strengthened and able to undertake what was before me. So
thanks, honey.
You're welcome.
That's perfect. I'll even give you a kiss for that one. Thank you. We celebrate our 21st anniversary this week, so. So what else? Who else has a story? Larry?
There was a time when I was very involved in the care of my parents, and I was feeling especially tired one day, and we had doctor appointments, and Mom and Dad needed help getting in and out of the car. They had their walkers, and I remember lifting my dad's feet into the car and making him comfortable. But there was a split second where, when I was holding his legs and moving them into position in the car, I felt a profound experience that I was lifting the legs and feet of Jesus. And in that moment, I realized I had strength to do whatever I needed to do. And for me, that changed so much.
Thank you. It's amazing how something so simple as that can just bring this experience of the Spirit. So, thank you.
I was working for World Vision, a big international humanitarian organization, and I was in Romania. And when you're in a big sort of job, you're wrapped up in politics and power struggles and stuff, even when you're doing good works. And I had the new ambassador, American ambassador to Romania, wanted to come and visit and see what we were doing. So we went off in the jeeps and we visited a little village where there was a headmaster, and we, in a school of 3 or 4 teachers, we'd been giving them supplies and help, and we'd rebuilt part of the school. And he came in the afternoon when we were visiting and asked if we would stay to dinner at his house. So, with some reluctance, we went to the house, and there was a super spread on the table in typical Romanian style, the very last of the food in their cupboard, probably. And he told us how much he depended on what we did. And he said, you come and you bring love. Other organizations come and they bring stuff. But you come and you love us. And I was so shaken by that, that it really shook me. And I went back and I got the whole team together. And I said, this is what we do that's important. It's not the big stuff. It's not the being nice to big donors. This is where it counts. This is where the rubber hits the road. This is where faith is practiced and where we need to be. And we changed our strategy, not just in Romania, we changed our strategy globally to be where it mattered, where the rubber hit the road with ordinary people. He had worn his last white shirt. He said it was his only white shirt. And he'd starched it, and it was still an off shade of white because it was so old, and he couldn't button it up. But he'd worn it specially for us to show how much he cared and wanted us to be.
Thank you. It's a wonderful story. I think we have time for one more. And if you don't have one, I got one. Yeah.
So when I was 12, I was diagnosed with epilepsy, and if you don't know what that is, it's a seizure disorder. And obviously that was life-changing for me. And at that age, obviously, like, I knew everything about life, and I was like, I had all these dreams and aspirations for myself and where I wanted to go in life. And it was crushing. It was like soul crushing that I had this diagnosis and could no longer pursue these certain aspirations that I had for myself. And I was angry at God. I was so angry. I just couldn't understand how I could go so long in life and then just reach this barrier. And I had no idea how that was going to affect me moving forward. And eventually, when I was in high school, I think I was like 16, I just had this epiphany one day where I was like, oh yeah, okay. God knew that I was so stubborn that I would literally do anything to go right when he wanted me to go left. And so he gave me this physical barrier so that I could not go right because he wants me to go left. And I had to just trust that. I had to realize that God, he has a plan, and I just had to trust that.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you. You remind me of the lesson from Job today. Job wrestling with that same thing, and then just trusting God. So thank you. Thank you for all your sharing, and thank you, wonderful pets, for being so patient through that. It's amazing how well pets behave in church. Who knew? So I thank you for your stories, because our spiritual journey, just like St. Francis's spiritual journey, is so important. And it's in these moments that I find that we can be intimate and vulnerable with each other. And we live in a world where that's not always the case, where we get to be intimate and vulnerable. So being able to strengthen those muscles is always a blessing. Being able to strengthen your muscles of being more sensitive, being more understanding, and strengthen your ability to listen, to make that space within ourselves that allows for God's boundless love to grow, where God dwells in us, where God visits us and supports us in connecting with the holy that dwells in all things. I wanted to share one quick quote from an Episcopal priest named the Reverend John Sanford. Are any of you familiar with John Sanford? A couple of you. I heard he was an associate here for a little while, but what he might be better connected to is Agnes Sanford, who went to this church as well. She is known for her spiritual healing, and this area over here, this little portico and this fountain area, is dedicated to her. And in the coming year, I know Lexi spent a lot of time, the church is working to rehab that and make it, into this new lively space. So Agnes was John's mother, and he was an inspired writer. He wrote a book called The Kingdom Within. And at the end of the book, he says this. He says, in its transcendence, the kingdom is a call into the future. In grounding our lives upon the kingdom within, we become a part of the evolving of human consciousness, which means being part of God's intention. Here in the evolution of consciousness taking place through individuals, but always transcending the individual in its significance. This is the Christianity of the future. So may we come together, may we come to grow, may we come to evolve, and build up that sacred space deep within us, that temple, that kingdom that lives within. And may we continue to share it with others when we go out into the world, so that others might know the greatness of God's love that dwells in all creation. Amen.